Hey guys, good morning. Welcome to another session of Lockdown Lessons. I hope you're safe and well wherever you are. Today, it is continuing to be very cold in Cornwall, but there is no snow. I wonder if there's snow wherever you are. There certainly is no snow here in St Agnes. But it's incredibly windy. I have gone outside and rescued some broken well, I haven't rescued them. The plant pots are beyond being rescued, but I've certainly been outside picking things up that have been broken in the wind. So I hope that the weather's all right where you are, and that it's not too windy, and that maybe there is some snow that is giving you something to look forward to. Today we are going to be doing some reading analysis, and we're going to be looking at a particular kind of text. A particular kind of text that is challenging to read, that might not be the thing that you would necessarily like to read. So over the last few weeks, what we've been doing is we've been improving our reading analysis skills. We have been looking at what language is and the way in which it works, and we've also been looking at writing too. And today's lesson, we're going to be confronting a really difficult text. And we're doing this on purpose, really, because I think that those of you that have been attending the lessons are in a really great position now to read difficult texts. And hopefully by the end of this session today, you're going to be able to read and understand text that perhaps you normally wouldn't think of reading, or perhaps text that, there's the wind again, perhaps texts that would put you off by their wordy nature. Perhaps texts do put you off by being too wordy. So today we're going to look at a really wordy text, a really old text, and a text that normally you might find really difficult to read. And today we're going to read it beautifully. You're going to analyse it really amazingly, using the methods and processes that we've been going over. So today's lesson is all about how to read difficult texts. Okay, so in order to analyse anything, we always need a line of inquiry. And today's line of inquiry is this: how does the writer use language to describe the setting? Okay, so that's our task today. How does the writer use language to describe the setting? That's very much our plan today. We're going to be thinking about this question: how does the writer use language to describe a setting? I'm going to show you the difficult text right at the end of the lesson, and we're going to work up to it. In your GCSEs, you're going to have to write and read about a Victorian texts, and they are notoriously difficult. They're always really, really wordy and really, really dense, and more dense even than more contemporary modern novels. But if you use our method, then reading these texts and analysing these texts is actually going to be a challenge, and it might even be a fun challenge. So today we're going to be looking at a text that's really dense, that's really old, that's really Victorian, that normally would put us off. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be thinking about the tools we need that we're going to use in order to read it well. And so by the end of this lesson, when I eventually show you this text, you're going to feel really able and capable to write about it. You'll really know what to do and what to look out for, and you'll feel really confident. Reading text, reading Victorian text is very much part of the national curriculum, and it's a real challenge. But if you've got a plan, as with anything actually, if you've got a plan and a strategy, you're going to know what to do. Okay, so that's the plan today. We're going to look at a really difficult text, but you're going to be able to do that. You're going to be able to read it easily. That's the plan. Okay, so the first thing we do whenever we have a question is we have a think about it. How does the writer use language to describe the setting? That's our question. I haven't shown you the text, as you know, and I want you to have a think about what this question's asking us to look at. So, well, the writer, there's a typo there. What is the writer trying to salve? Well, that should say. What is the writer trying to say? So what is he trying to say with language? So at the beginning of any question that you get in any exam or any work at school, you need to think about the question first. And it's a really good idea to write around that question, to annotate it, despite my terrible typo there. In this question, having a think about what the writer is really trying to say. Writers, as we know, codify. They hide sometimes what they really mean, and it's our job to try and solve that puzzle. So what is the writer trying to say? And then setting, that really is the key word here. What is a setting? What is implied by this? So I tell you what, guys, what I'd like you to do then is just answer those questions there, just the last two on that slide. What is implied by setting? That last question. What does setting mean? And if you can write that in the chat, that'd be great. Okay, so you're going to be writing about a Victorian text today, and you're going to be thinking about a Victorian text. And in your GCSEs, even though you might think it's a bit cruel, you're going to have to write about a text that was written, 130 plus years ago, maybe even 150 years ago. And in order to do that, we need a strategy. And here it is. So in the chat, just write down what is implied by setting. And yeah, thanks, Chloe. You're spot on, yeah. The scene. That's exactly right. So the scene, the setting, the environment, the place, the conditions, the atmosphere, all these things contribute to the setting. Okay. So now that's our question. We're going to be keeping that in the back of our mind. And today we're going to be thinking about our strategy to be able to understand and read and then ultimately write about a really challenging, difficult text. So we're going to begin at the beginning. This might seem a bit familiar to you, but going over things is very much part of learning. So can you please write in the chat what this is? Okay, you might think this has got absolutely nothing to do with a Victorian text, but I disagree. I think this is absolutely central to our understanding of what a Victorian text is. So, what is this that you can see on the screen? It's important that we have a think about it. Chloe, it's a good guess. I'm afraid you're wrong. It is not a dog, sadly. It looks, it looks a bit like a dog. Oh, what's that? I wonder if you could have another guess. Again, we're going to be writing about really difficult Victorian texts, and these are often very wordy and very complicated. So because we're going to be writing about really difficult, complicated text, I'd like you, please, to tell me what this is. What could it be? Chloe, perhaps cartoon dog. Good. The first one is exactly that. It is a cartoon dog, or rather a representation of a dog. It is not a dog. My dog, who I love very much, Duke, is lying behind me. He's a little old, and he's got flatulence today. So if this was smell-o-vision, yeah, you wouldn't be tuning in. But this absolutely is not a cartoon dog. It fundamentally isn't. It's a representation. It's a picture of a dog, and it's a cartoon picture of a dog. This is also a pretty interesting photograph, but again, it's a photograph of a dog. Remember that language is what we use to call the world. It's what we use to name things. And that language it begins here. It begins as a verbal language designed to be heard. And then, since we've become civilized and modernized, we've written those sounds down in a different code. So language, words, are representations of things. And I know I've banged on about that for quite some time, but it's really important that we recognise that words are not things, but they represent them in different ways. So just in the same way that this is a cartoon dog representing a dog, that drawing tells us perhaps something about the animal, that it's fun. But the word dog tells us about the animal too. It tells us, because of the nature of the monosyllabic structure, that it is, well, perhaps simple. Dogs can be a little complicated, but mostly they're quite simple animals. Also, there's the word sounds in dog. There's a plosive at the beginning, suggesting the thing rather is playful. So language represents the world, and sounds and structures in language give us information. Okay, so this forms very much the basis of our code-breaking system. So language is a code, language is a system of representation, and to really access it and to write about it, we need a code-breaking system. And here it is. For those of you that are unfamiliar, this is our code-breaking system, and it's a system designed to help us in a methodical way write about language. And you can see at the bottom of this triangle, you can see the sound. So I talked about the dog having that plosive D at the beginning, suggesting it's playful. There's that plosive word you can see in the bottom part of the triangle. And the fact that the word dog is monosyllabic, that's in the second part of the triangle. Oh, there's the dog again, telling us that it's simple. So this is a tool designed to help us go to language. And when we're answering a question about a text, whether it's simple or difficult, whether it's easy, whether we know it or we don't, we take this toolkit to it. Yes, we want to comprehend what's going on in a piece of text, but we also want to be able to think about it in an analytical and intellectual way. And it's this system that will help you do that. You know, in schools or in class, a teacher might say, well, what does this mean? And I don't know about you, but those really large questions sometimes flummox me. But if you have a strategy and a plan, things become easier. So our triangle system is a step-by-step guide, and you have the image at the top. So you've got metaphor, personification, simile, and juxtaposition. These are the image parts of language. And actually, what I'd really like you to do while I waffle on here is, can you define, please, what a metaphor is, what simile is, and what personification is, and write that in the chat. Okay? So there's our code-breaking system. And it's shaped like a triangle, really, in its design to make us funnel down and look at the big picture, the image, the metaphor, then the shape, and then the sound. So when you go to language, you need to be thinking about language in that way. So that really is our first clue. in order to read a really complicated text, it doesn't matter how complicated it is, you have this step-by-step guide. Now, it might be that you're watching this video, perhaps after it's live streamed, and you're thinking, well, that's all very well, but I don't understand what this triangle is that you're talking about. Go and have a look at our videos on analysing language, and it explains in more detail what those bits are. But hopefully, irregardless, you'll be able to see that that triangle is a step-by-step guide. You do that, image, or rather the metaphor, then you look at the shape, and then you look at the sound. So that's our first hint today. When looking at a difficult text, you've got the beginnings of a plan, and it's the triangle. And it is and remains the most effective tool that I've used in teaching. And young people that have been taking their GCSEs or their A-levels or even their undergraduates, and when I did my postgraduate masters, I used the triangle to really almost test to see if it worked, and it really does work. So use it because it's brilliant. So we've got that systematic pattern of analysis, and we've got to think back to our question now. So our question is, how does the writer use language to describe setting? As Chloe's already said, when we're talking about setting, we're talking about the scene, we're talking about the environment, and this text that we're about to see at some point in our lesson is going to probably have some setting in it, and that will be our focus. So we'll be thinking about the scene in the back of our heads. I'm not just waving strangely here, but we'll also be thinking about our triangle. So whatever text we're looking at today, we know what the question is, it's the scene, what is meant by it, and we've got our triangle to help us answer it in a step-by-step way. So yeah, thank you, Chloe. So a simile compares two things, and it's introduced by like or as. Yeah, fantastic. So cheeks like roses, great. And personification makes a non-living thing have animal or human characteristics. Okay, that's really good, fantastic. Both of these things I know already happen to be in the text that we're going to be looking at later. Great definitions. Metaphors are more challenging because they're harder to spot. It's when straight metaphors, because actually really similes and personification, they're all metaphoric. They all sort of are metaphors, but similes are easier to spot because of like and as. And personification's a bit easier to spot as well when it gives an animal or a non-living thing, as you said, Chloe, human characteristics, the dog laugh. Great. So metaphors effectively the joining together of two different things and things that don't belong together. If we think about language as that system of representation, you can imagine that language has got categories. So one category, and we might as well because we've talked about it a bit today, it's thinking about domestic pets. So a domestic pet is a dog. What else could be in that category? A cat, a rat. We could have, my daughter's got a hamster. So these might be domestic pets. And then you combine those with things that are in a completely different category, and the thoughtful hamster, that's an example of personification. Let me give you an example. I'm trying to think of one about a hamster. I've got stuck. I hadn't planned this. The rubber hamster. There we go. There is a metaphor. The rubber hamster. Two things that don't belong together. And it's completely, and this is really the central part of this lesson and also reading, is that the rubber hamster is impossible. You can't have a hamster that is rubber unless, you can't. You can have a hamster shape made out of rubber. You can't have a hamster rubber. It's impossible. And just like this metaphor that you will have seen before, he looked outside and the sky was made of iron. We know that the sky cannot be made of iron and is impossible. In fact, our similes our personification and our straight metaphors are all impossible. They can't literally be. There cannot be hamster rubbers. There cannot be iron skies. And that's what you're going to be looking for on the page. It's the most crucial part of reading difficult text, is to find the impossible element. Because once you've found that impossible piece of language, you've got something to write about. Because once you've found the impossible, whether it's simile, whether it's personification, whether it's metaphor, you've got something to write about. And you can write about the metaphor. And then you can write about the word shapes in that quote. And then you can write about the sound in that quote. But it's metaphor. The crucial thing is the metaphoric. When you find that on the page, whether it's a Victorian text or even a text from 2,000 years ago, that's the thing that you're going to be looking for. And just to give us some jogging of the memory, we have a process when we're looking at metaphors. We separate the real from the unreal. We explore the unreal in isolation, and we draw our conclusions. So separating the real from the unreal, for iron sky, that is clear, you can see what is unreal. The sky was made of iron, so the made of iron bit is the unreal part, and then you take that to one side and you explore it in isolation. So iron, so what does iron suggest? So it's metallic, it's heavy, high boiling point, and all those kinds of things. What can you tell about iron? And then you draw your conclusions, and you make your conclusions about what the sky is like. Well, I've said that the iron is heavy, so if you look outside and the sky is made of iron, it could suggest that there are lots of clouds, or it's about to rain, and that's how you start drawing your conclusions. So we've done a lot so far in our lesson, but just to recap, we're going to be looking at a Victorian text very shortly that's quite challenging to read, but we have a code-breaking system. We have our triangle, and when we go to this Victorian text, what you need to be hunting for is the impossible. Whether that's a metaphor, a simile, or personification, that's what you should hone in on, because once you do, you can start writing about the shape of language and the sound. So, we're about to start, but before we do, remember that we're being asked about setting. So I'm going to read this to you. It's quite wordy, but as I do this, what I'd like you to do is to write down the impossible in the chat. And when you see something that's impossible, let's write it down. Okay, so what does the writer, how does the writer use language to describe the setting? And here we go. There's going to be lots of words on the page, but you're hunting for the impossible. Here we go. Book the first, Poverty, Chapter 1, Sun and Shadow. 30 years ago, Marseille lay burning in the sun one day. Just mention that Marseille is a place in the south of France. So that is our place. A blazing sun upon a fierce August day was no greater rarity in southern France then than any other time, before or since. Everything in Marseille and about Marseille had stared at the fervid sky and been stared at in return until a staring habit had become universal there. Strangers were stared out of countenance by staring white houses, staring white walls, staring white streets, staring tracks of arid road, staring hills from which verdure was burnt away. The only thing to be seen not fixedly staring and glaring were the vines drooping under the load of grapes. These did occasionally wink a little, as the hot air barely moved their faint leaves. So in that first paragraph, there are a few impossible things, and even though that language is strange and difficult, you should be able to find the impossible things. Next paragraph. Remember, write the impossible in the chat. There was no wind to make a ripple on the foul water within the harbour or on the beautiful sea without. The line of demarcation between the two colours, black and blue, showed the point which the pure sea would not pass, but it lay as quiet as the abominable pool with which it never mixed. Boats without awnings were too hot to touch. Ships blistered at their moorings. The stones of the quays had not cooled night or day for months. Hindus, Russians, Chinese, Spaniards, Portuguese, Englishmen, Frenchmen, Genoese, Neapolitans, Venetians, Greeks, Turks, descendants from all the builders of Babel, come to trade at Marseille, sought the shade alike, taking refuge in any hiding place from a sea too intensely blue to be looked at, and a sky of purple set out with one great flaming jewel of fire. Again, there's some impossible there. Write that in the chat when you see it. The last paragraph. The universal stare made the eyes ache. Towards the distant line of Italian coast, indeed, it was a little relieved by light clouds of mist slowly rising from the evaporation of the sea, but it softened nowhere else. Far away, the staring roads, deep in dust, stared from the hillside, stared from the hollow, stared from the interminable plain. Far away, the dusty vines overhanging wayside cottages and the monotonous wayside avenues of parched trees without shade drooped beneath the stare of earth, and when they were awake, which rarely happened, so did the exhausted labourers in the fields. Everything that lived or grew was oppressed by the glare, except the lizard passing swiftly over rough stone walls and the sickler, chirping his dry, hot chirp like a rattle. The very dust was scorched brown, and something quivered in the atmosphere, as if the air itself were panting. That's very clearly quite a long piece of text, but you should be able to see enough impossible on the page. And once you have that impossible thing, you're going to be able to write about the language. So let's just go through it then. Where are the impossible things? In that first paragraph, the fierce August day, that's impossible. And of course this repeated metaphor throughout, staring white walls, staring white houses, staring white streets, staring tracts of arid road. In this description of this place, everything is staring at each other. Thank you, Chloe. Yes, a fierce August day. Everything is staring at each other. So, fierce August day actually is a really good quotation to use. And it's really good because, of course, it's a straight metaphor. So too, we've got that personification with those staring white houses. So what sort of place is it? This is the question that you would ruminate before you would write anything down. So fierce August day, what does that tell us about the place? So we've got a strategy. Everything is staring at each other, exactly. So you've got that fierce August day. What? We separate the real from the unreal, so fierce. What does fierce suggest? Anger? Dissension, perhaps? Quick to anger? People are intolerant? And that really, if you think about things staring at each other, this idea of intolerance and anger and danger, that tells us perhaps all we need to know about this place. But there's more too. Let's have a look. Yeah, a hot day. So that's that second or third paragraph down, you can see. At the end, we've got the sun with one great flaming jewel of fire. It says, and a sky of purple set with one great flaming jewel of fire. Well, of course, that is also a metaphor. The sun is a flaming jewel of fire. That's my large plant pot that is blown over again. So the sun is a large flaming jewel of fire. And what does this suggest? Well, it suggests that the heat is oppressive. So again, you separate the real from the unreal. Jewel of fire. That's what the sun is described as. So what does that tell us about the sun? What does it tell us about the place? And then my very favourite is the last in the last line. Something quivered in the atmosphere as if the air itself was panting. So if we were to separate the real from the unreal there, that last line there, something quivered in the atmosphere as if the air itself were panting. And this, the word panting, something that Duke would do. What does it suggest if something is panting? So once you've found these impossible quotations, you need to choose one or two, and they form part of your paragraph. Choose one per paragraph, and then think about. So if we've got that, the fact that the place is, it is a fierce August day. The writer, in this case Charles Dickens, is writing about Marseille, and he says it's a fierce August day. What does that tell us about the place? Fierce August day tells us. So have a look. These are some writing prompts that might be useful. Again, if you are attempting some work for us and you want to send it in, go back to this screen once the video is completed and have a look at it. But this is how to begin. The writer presents Marseille as, and that's very much the first thing to do when you're writing your analytical paragraphs. And then what you want to do is you want to use that quotation that really encapsulates Marseille, but it has to have some impossible evidence in, simile, metaphor, personification, and then you start exploring it. You explore the image, you explore the shape, and then you explore the sound. The trick really is that whatever text you're looking at, you're doing the same thing again and again and again. I've certainly begun reading texts that I don't totally understand, but the system of analysis, our triangle, can help solve those problems. I don't know about you, but sometimes you might feel like you simply don't get what you're reading, but take the triangle to that and you've got something to say about it. Hunt for the metaphor. Hunt for the impossible on the page. And when you do that, you've got something to write about. So if you'd like to make an attempt yourself and send in your work, we'll be able to give you some feedback. And that goes for those of you that are here live, or perhaps those of you that might be checking this out after it's been recorded. And send your work in. You can send it into lockdownlessons@skoolcornwall.com, and we will do our best to provide you with some feedback and help you move forward. The trick is, though, whatever you're reading, if it's complicated, if it's easy, find the impossible and go through our step-by-step process, write about the image, write about the shape of words, and write about the sound. And when you do that, you're going to start creating some really beautiful analysis that will prove that you are super clever and really thoughtful. The biggest thing I could say is that the trick really is have a plan. If you've got a plan, you'll know what to do. If you don't have a plan, you'll be wondering. So thanks ever so much for checking out today's lesson. Thank you for your contribution in the live chat. Please follow us on our Facebook page, on our crowdfunder page, and please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And again, please do send in your work, whether you're watching this now or whether you're watching it in a recorded film, and send it into lockdownlessons@skoolcornwall.com. Hope you have a safe weekend and you enjoy yourselves, and we'll be back next week on Tuesday. I recognise it's half term for everybody, but we'll be there offering the service throughout. So please continue to check that out. Okay, please take care, and we'll see you shortly. Okay, bye.